We should acknowledge that we are here on Duwamish lands. And every time we acknowledge how our city grows, we must realize that all of that growth came at the expense of the first Indigenous people.
City leaders often use that script as a prelude to gatherings and events. They pause and then move on with the show. For many Duwamish people, including James Rasmussen, it's not enough.
That's not helping us at all. I mean, it really doesn't do anything for us at all. An acknowledgement, you know what, it's like telling a ghost story. I'm sorry, we're beyond that.
Talk is cheap.
Exactly.
His ancestors fished the Duwamish River for generations and lived along its banks. The story of what happened to them after white settlers moved in is motivation for Rasmussen to keep advocating for his people.
It's my ancestors walk with me. They're here. My family is here. I know that.
The wrongs started shortly after the Duwamish made what they thought was a deal with the American settlers who were moving west. The Duwamish leader, Chief South, or Seattle, signed a treaty with the U.S. government in 1855, giving up thousands of acres of land, which today includes much of King County. In exchange, the U.S. was supposed to guarantee the Duwamish hunting and fishing rights, as well as land on a reservation. Not long after the ink dried, white settlers blocked the formation of a Duwamish reservation. While Seattle boomed, city leaders told the Duwamish, get out of the way.
First laws in the city of Seattle that were created were, number one, Indian people could not own property. That's racism. After sunset, you better not be in the city, or else you'll be arrested.
For being an Indian,
for just being an Indian.
People settled Seattle in order to make it an industrial world-class city. That was, explicitly the intent from the beginning.
Doesn't matter who was here first.
It absolutely did not matter who was here first.
B.J. Cummings wrote The River That Made Seattle, which chronicles the city's fraught history.
Colonial occupation requires, by its nature, a willingness and even enthusiasm for subjugating people who are already there. That's not possible unless you consider them lesser than yourself, or unless you consider yourself more powerful than them.
My grandfather always told me, you are Duwamish. Be proud of that. The other thing he would tell you, don't tell a lot of other people, because when he was raised and my mother was raised, they were berated because they were Indian people.
Injustice echoes today. The federal government still does not recognize the Duwamish as a tribe, which denies them funding for housing, education, and health care. The government argues, in part, that the Duwamish, who number roughly 600, lack a, quote, distinct American Indian community.
We signed the treaty. What's happening now is an abomination of law.
The fact that as a colonial government, we refuse to even recognize that they are still here is perhaps the deepest of the cuts. Duwamish people invited, recruited, supported, and ultimately sided, really, with the settlers here. And today we deny their existence.
But a growing number of people are waking up, realizing that doing right by the Duwamish
we should acknowledge that we are here on Duwamish lands
is about more than simply repeating kind words.
We must realize that all of that growth came at the expense of the first Indigenous people.
For example, there's a fundraising effort called Real Rent, where anyone can voluntarily pay a kind of rent into a fund that goes to the Duwamish. The idea being, we're on their land, let's pay them for it. Donors choose how much to give each month, and the money goes to a nonprofit that supports tribe members.
We are offering scholarships now to Duwamish kids to be able to go to school.
The Duwamish continue to push for federal recognition. It's a long, tiring pursuit, but Seattle's first people persevere.
We're getting stronger.
You keep fighting.
Yes. Yeah. the spirits of my ancestors is why I do this. And for the generations to come ahead.